Hello and welcome to Analog Shtick, a podcast all about video games. And things are a little bit different today, as I'm not actually doing this in the comfort of my own studio. I'm actually at the Virgin Game Media Space, which is in Shoreditch, London. And the reason I'm here is I've been dragged down here by my special guest today. He is Alan Zucconi. He is the developer of the currently in development Still Time. And Alan, it's a pleasure to be doing this interview with you today. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm very fine. Really nice place to be here.
Yeah, I mean, tell me, we'll start off with this place we're at today. How did you find out about this, and how's it sort of been in terms of helping you with your development and stuff like that?
I discovered this place from Twitter because, I'm as you probably can see, I'm really tweeting a lot. And, just random friends were tweeting about this space. So I just went on a website and it was actually really nice. I wasn't expected to be, as nice, as good as it is. So it's a shame it's here just for a few weeks.
And, talking about how I actually came to know of your game and of you, I met you at the E2 event, which from I think it was the last show I did with a guy, Jeff Tanton, who's working on Foul Play. E2 was the equivalent of E3, if you want to call it that, and they had a whole bunch of people down at the Relax Play bar in London, in Soho, and you were there showing off Still Play. And so tell me about how you came to be doing that and how you felt that overall, the response, the feedback you got from the game, how did that go for you?
Once again, it's Twitter fault. I heard people discussing about E2 from Twitter, and it was actually an event organized in very few weeks. So I just went on the website and send an email to George Baker and say, I've got this game. Would you like the game to be in E2? And it was actually really nice because he replied to me really quickly and he just said, okay, yes, let's come. And the event was extremely nice. And I heard of people that actually in E2, they wanted initially to go to E3, but then they say, if E3 is a little bit too big, it's going to be too expensive, so it's better to do something, smaller, much more, related to the size of our studio. So I was really, really happy, of being there, because also you have the chance of meeting other developers and directly talking, with people, and probably every single person that entered inside loading bar that day also played Still Time or also saw the game, and this is something that on E3 would have been impossible because it's quite a big event. Yeah.
And was that the first place where you really had a lot of hands-on experience with just your average player? Because I know that it's been showcased in PC Gamer and Polygon. How much? I'm presuming you had maybe one or two people playtesting it, close friends or other developers. But how much hands-on playtime had just your average gamer had up until this point with the game?
Actually, the game has been out for quite a lot. The alpha version we have seen. And I think that the first time I showed it to an event was at the Indie Game Expo 2012. So it was a prototype at that time. So it wasn't, as polished as as refined as it is now. But so I actually had, a lot of comments, a lot of events already. So it wasn't, the first big event in which the game was big in an indie sense, in which it was actually featured. But of course, it's always good to have new feedback, new type of feedback, because usually every event has a different type of audience, and different type of audiences, require different. They have different needs for game. They want different things. They expect different things. So every time, you have something slightly different that you want to change, to tailor according to the audience you want to aim for.
So in terms of the actual game itself, I guess that would probably be a nice place to segue into in terms of talking about the actual game. When I first saw it, I had this thing, and I was talking to Jeff about it on the last show. I looked at it and I thought, kind of looks like a game, looks like Braid. Don't want to say it to him because he's probably heard it a million times. So. And I'm sure, from every kind of preview and review of what they've seen so far, they've all mentioned it. All the comments in it have said, yeah, it's a little bit like Braid. But I knew straight away that it had an element of that, but it's still its own completely unique thing. So just explain how there are similarities to it, but how it is its own separate game.
I think the problem is that people are not used to have games in which they play with time travel. So because Braid was probably one of the first one that actually integrate time travel and was had such a huge success, everyone, when they think about games and time travel, they think, oh, I'm thinking about Braid. So I think that this is where the actually relation came from. But the game is actually has very little in common with Braid, because the time travel mechanic that we are actually implementing in Still Time is completely different. The easiest, if you played Braid, the easiest way of thinking of Still Time is Braid with the ability of going back in time, but not in space. And this actually makes a big difference, because all the puzzles in which that you play in Still Time require you to think not just in the past, but also in the future. You have to plan ahead. Because, for example, in Braid, it's often common to find keys inside of a pit or a hole. You take the key and you go back in time and you go up with the key. You can't do this in Still Time, because if you find yourself stuck into a hole, you just can't go back. So you always have to plan your way and thinking about time travel in a different way compared to what Braid did. And I think that also the main difference when I played Braid for the first time is that, and I played after actually having made Still Time. In Braid is much more about emotion and feeling, and it's a journey, it's a story. It's a game that tries to explain a story, and the time travel is more of a tool to explain the story. But I think that the main mechanic, the main dynamic of the game is the story itself. In Still Time, this is a little way the other way around. So yeah, I have a story, and it will be featured in the new version, but it's not. I think it's not what the game is about. The game is mainly about the gameplay, and the story is, something added on top of that.
So explain to me then, because I've been on that side of game development, and I've seen how some people put levels together, whether they use just Lego blocks to give themselves ideas, or just pen and paper. With what you've got going on there, that's really, I can imagine, it's very in-depth, trying to figure out how to make those levels. Like what was your plan of execution to make these levels come to life?
The first time I made a level probably took me like 2 days, because it was, if you make a level, you also have to master the mechanic of the game. And because at the first time I wasn't actually sure about how I wanted the mechanic to work and what I could do and what I couldn't do with the time travel mechanic, the design of the first level, it was actually quite a pain because of that. Once you've done that, the rest is very easy, in the sense that if you look at the learning curve of the actual alpha version that is online, it's quite slow. So you start with a door, then with 2 doors, 3 doors, and then you change and you add something new. So that's what I'm trying to do. I usually start with introducing an element that people are familiar with, for example, a door or a button or a switch or whatever. And people pretty much everyone knows how those elements behave in normal standard 2D platformers. And you see it once, you see with time travel, then you get a feeling of how it works, and then you start slowly into adding stuff to the gameplay. So it's slowly building up elements, and you say, okay, let's add something else, until you get something that is reasonably complicated.
And so let's go back to the start then. Like, give me a timeline of when you started thinking of this idea, because I know that you've done a few bits and pieces before. I know you've done like Lud and Dare projects and stuff like that. But this is bigger than both the projects you've done before. So like, what was the time span from when you started thinking, okay, I'd like to make something a little bit more fuller, to where you are now then?
I always wanted to make a game that challenges, the current state of the art, in the sense that, usually I won't say that, but the vast majority of indie game is just, a nice redo of, Super Mario with a better graphics, something like that. I say, oh, come on, we can do better, in a sense that we can do something new. So I always had this idea of playing a little bit with like space, and I was so happy when I saw Portal for the first time, because it was something that challenges the normal way you approach level design and game mechanics. And I actually wanted to make something that forms space, some kind of bizarre things like that. But I say, oh no, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea how to make something like that. So I say, well, let's try something else. So I started this idea of time travel mechanic, and I actually thought about it for a very long time, but I didn't have any actual gameplay in mind. It was just, I want to do a game in which you can go back in time, you can do blah blah blah. But it was a very fuzzy idea. It wasn't something precise, exactly know what to do. And then, from there, I just started making games. Well, I always made games since, when I was a child, but I usually made game for myself. So when I actually wanted to release the first game, and it was Raptors, I don't know if you probably saw it, I wanted to do something big. And then I thought, well, I might not be able to do something big because, everyone wants their first game to be gigantic, to be enormous, to be successful. And then they realize that, they do 1/3 of development and they stopped because they can't finish the game. So I say, let's try with something smaller. I tried with Raptors and it actually went extremely well. For the time spent in the game, it was actually, very well received. And that's exactly what I wanted. And this pushed me to say, okay, I've done this one. Maybe I can go to the next step. Maybe I can do something bigger. And this is also an advice for anyone who wants to start game developing. Don't try to start. If you're really garage indie like I started, don't start with something big because you probably won't finish it. Start with something small, and then it will give you the know-how, and all the mistakes you will make with that big thing will actually help you for the next big thing.
And so, when did Still Time start then to where we are now then?
The first version I showed of Still Time was at oh god, let me remember. Indie Game Expo probably 2012. Yeah, we were saying about that. And then the version you can see now online has been made for London Indie Day Meetup last year. And actually there was no graphics at all, so all the graphics was made in like 1 week, just assembled for that event. And then I actually never touched the game again, in the sense that I never made any other changes to the game, because I said, okay, it's almost finished, it's reaching a reasonable level of completion. And in my mind I was like, okay, I can just release that game in a Flash platform or whatever, and I'm done with that. And instead, what happened is that I tried to showing the game to events, and while I was at Game Camp 6, actually, Mike Bithell saw the game, and he was really interested in the game. He said, "Oh, this game is really clever," and it's been really, really nice because the same day he actually contacted Sony, and he said, "Oh, I want this game on PS Vita." And so, like 2 days afterwards, I was, in Sony headquarters in London, and we discussed about bringing the game on PS Vita. So that's how actually, from a indie Flash game, it's starting to become something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, because I'd imagine from when you started the idea, and I asked this question just because I imagine when you came up with this idea, you probably wasn't thinking about Sony and PS Vita, because obviously by this point, it was February when they announced their sort of commitment to the indie genre, and then there was stuff like Mike Biffle with Thomas Was Alone being released, and so I imagine that, when this first come about, you would have been probably just happy with this being on like Desera or something, or like, I know you had stuff you've put up on Newgrounds, so to have potentially this being here on the Sony platform must be a pretty exciting deal for you.
Yeah, also because, when I made a game in my mind, I thought, okay, it's going to be a Flash game. So I will go, Flash game license something, or, I will have like revenues on Newgrounds. So that was my my mindset at the time. I wasn't actually expecting to put the game on a console. Surely not on PS Vita. And I thought, okay, maybe this game can go on PC, and that would be nice. Maybe one day it would be on Steam. I don't know. Yeah, I wish. That's surely not on PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, or PS Vita. I never thought about that. So as soon as I had actually the chance of bringing that, I say, oh God, now let's do it. Let's make this happen. So that was actually a really nice opportunity.
And there's a subtle irony in that, like the visuals. I mean, obviously there are many indie games that use a very simplistic art style, but it's not even just the art style of Still Time. It's the way that the screen, it looks like it's kind of bowing out like a very old monitor, and it's got the vertical syncs sort of kind of going the way they do. Like all of the art stuff like that, is that all of yours? Is that what you intended to have it like that? And can you imagine that being on a Vita screen and how that's going to look?
That's a very bad question in the sense that Yes, the game has a resolution that it resembles a very CRT old monitor. So that kind of effects perfectly works on that. I try to bring the same effect on a HD monitor, and it feels really weird because you don't usually have CRT HD monitors, so it looks a little bit alien to it. Doesn't really have the same effect. So I'm trying to figure out something similar, maybe not exactly the same, but something similar. I like the idea that the game is like playing in a VHS cassette. You just rewind it, and going back. I like that. So I would like to reuse that effect, but probably the monitor bending won't be won't be as good for PS Vita as it has been for the Flash version.
So no chance of a direct port onto the Oculus Rift then, probably.
Oh God. No, and now I'm doing the game in Unity, and if you're making something in Unity, it's quite straightforward to bring it, to export it for Oculus Rift. The problem is that the game is very flat, so I'm not sure that having Oculus Rift you will actually perceive, some kind of that. Maybe what it might be interesting is, having the timelines, on top, and if you move your head, they move with you. But again, the game is pretty much flat, so I'm not sure I can use 3D in that way.
It was more of a joke question, but it's nice that you're even thinking about it. Well, no, it's just because, I mean, I've seen there have been developers that have gone on to use Unity, like Dan Marshall. I remember seeing him talking about that he's still not entirely sure about a 2D plane working, even though his new game that he's working on and Gun Monkeys was both using Unity. And obviously Thomas was alone using Unity. Like, what was it Mike Biffle that got you onto using Unity, or was it just something that you saw as being used and thought, okay, this is a good platform, this is a good engine that I could port my game over to?
At the beginning, I didn't want to use Unity in the sense that I started a Flash game, and that was because Flash is really actually good if you want to make prototype, if you want to make easy stuff. But as soon as I had to move to PlayStation Vita, Unity seems to me the most reasonable option because, of course, with PS Vita you have dev kits, but the type of programming you have to do with that dev kit is quite low level. So we are talking about C++ level, and it's really close to the hardware machine. So you can do very optimized stuff, but if you want to do a 2D game, that is fairly simple and it doesn't use graphics in such an extensive way, then I think the Unity is a good compromise. It might not be the best way of doing 2D games because, of course, 2D games in Unity are 3D games constrained to in a Z-axis. But it's a compromise. It's not as it won't run as fast as a proper 2D game, but you also have all the features of 3D. So I think it's quite good for start.
So going back to you were talking about wanting to kind of push and challenge the sort of puzzle mechanics that you can use in games. And like just for you in your biography alone, like are you currently studying your PhD and like all of that, how you've in a way been able to implement that into how you've wanted to make games and like vice versa, does this help at all in any way?
I've studied computing since, when I could read, I started, reading books from computing. So I got know-how of programming since when I was quite young. So I won't say that, the university of the college themselves helped me to make better games, also because that's not what I'm studying. For example, now I'm doing a PhD in computing, but I'm working in bioengineering, so it's something completely, quite different from what I'm doing now. What is good, though, is that my PhD has been quite flexible in terms of time. So, it's not a 9 to 5 work. So, for example, you can arrive a little bit later in the morning. You can go home a little bit, a little bit late if you need to. So this gave me the flexibility to actually introduce time to make the game, and that's something really good. The problem, of course, is that, the drawback of doing a PhD is that your work never ends, in a sense that it's not, okay, I'm working, I don't know, in this shop, and when I'm going home, the work is over. If doing a PhD, usually you're working on problems, and you have to solve problems. So when you're going home, you're still thinking about those problems. And this is something really bad, because you might have all the time you need to make the game, but what you don't have is a mindset of working, because you're still thinking, oh, how do I solve that problem I had yesterday at work? So that's something a little bit harder. That is, for me, is not easy to do both at the same time. So I have phases in which I'm more doing the PhD, phases in which I'm more doing games, and it's a little bit juggling between those two.
So when was the last day you had off, and when do you think you're going to get another day off anytime soon?
The question is, day off from PhD or from making games?
From either. From either.
Oh God, I have no idea. I was discussing with some friends, and it turns out that the last time I actually had a holiday was probably like 4 years ago. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I had holidays, but it was holidays from PhD, like I'm on holiday, but actually I'm making game. And, when I'm on holiday from game, I'm actually doing the PhD, or, my master was whatever. So I actually never had, probably in many years, a week in which I'm not doing anything. And I think I would feel very guilty if I had that. Because every hour you're spending not doing something is an hour you could have spent doing something. And this is true especially in game development, when if you're the only one working on a game, the game advances only when you are actually doing something. So that's that's quite bad.
Yeah, I mean, like, has there been any times when you've thought about that, okay, I could bring this person in to help me do stuff? Because I know the music was done separately, because from talking to many game developers, doing the programming, the art and everything else, they're fine with when it comes to the music. Like, no, just leave it to someone else, just let them do it, I just haven't got the time. Like, how much work have you, or how much stuff have you had to get ideas and help from other people, and how much is just, no, this is me, this is my game, I've done this on my own?
I have a very strong background in computing and software architecture, so for the programming part, I had no problem, making a game myself, even making the engine myself, rather than using Flixel or, another framework. What I actually have no idea how to do is graphic and sound. And you can see in still time, there is a lot of effort in doing effects, because that's something that I've done, with code. And that was really easy for me to do it. But the graphic itself is done with paint. I shouldn't say that, but it's true. And I remember that, well,
It's the in thing at the moment.
yeah, I say, well, really indie. And I remember that at the beginning, I didn't intend to leave, red rectangles for doors. It has never been my real intention. And surely this won't happen on PS Vita. But while I was working on the game, Mike Peter was, having his development blog about Thomas Was Alone. And I remember sending him an email, like, at the time, probably wasn't as famous and popular as it was now. So I sent him a message and say, oh, hello, Mike, I saw you're working on a game, it's about rectangles. And, I think that I will keep rectangles in my game as well, because they look quite nice. So, I mean, that was how I just decided to keep them.
So with you're talking about, again, going back to the challenge of the levels and the game. Like, you have a set mind of, okay, I want this game to be as difficult as it can be, or it was just a natural thing as you going through the levels. Because I remember at E2 we was watching a couple of girls playing it, and they were just girls. I'm just not picking on them. They were the ones playing it, and they were having some difficulty with some of the mechanics, and not because the mechanics themselves were poorly implemented, but because the game works really well. It's a very difficult game in certain areas. So was that just, okay, this game is going to be more challenging than your average platformer, or just like Braid, it has those challenges, but you've decided to tweak it just a little bit further as well?
That's something I'm really working on, because, as you said, there are people that play Still Time for the first time and they immediately understand how it works, and it's fine. And there are people that play Still Time for like 3 hours and they say, "Oh, which character am I controlling?" And they can't get there, and that's such a problem, because of course, if you do a very long tutorial, those players might get to play well in the game, but then all the others will say, "Oh, boring! I already know what to do this. So why am I forced to do that?" So what I'm trying to do for a new version is something a little bit more open, and the player will actually be forced to do a tutorial, but he won't be forced to finish the tutorial, in a sense that after, the one, two, first three rooms of the tutorial, he could actually escape and take a different path. And that's something I really, really appreciate, for example, in Fez, where you have thousands of different puzzles, and some of them are really easy. Just cubes sparse around the world, you can just grab them, and you can finish the level just with them. Just playing and jumping and rarely turning around the screen. But if you want an extra challenge, then what you can do is, trying to understand and find all the hidden secrets and stuff like that in a game. And that's what I would like to do with Still Time. So something where you have a main path and you can follow that, or you can just try to challenge yourself and do extra rooms, extra stuff. And just because of this, something I'm working on in the moment is, and we are using, on Twitter we're using the hashtag Indie Homage, is that there are a lot of other indie game developers here in London at the moment, and they're working on very bunch of cool stuff. So we said, why don't mix up all our games? So Still Time will actually have some secret rooms that will contain reference to other indie games that have been developed here in the London scene recently. And in the same way, other games developed here in the London scene will feature, stuff from Still Time. And I know that this might be a problem for some developers because, of course, the time travel mechanic is quite challenging to re-implement. It's not easy at all if you want to do it properly. So I don't expect, them to re-implement the game mechanic, while, in Still Time is a platformer. So pretty much every platformer game, I can make a very simple level implementing our mechanics. But, there might be, I can't say anything at the moment, but there might be games in which you can play as the main character of Still Time. You can unlock new characters, and some of them will be, the guy from Still Time.
That's really cool, because I like, because there are a lot of games, indie games, that do that sort of thing. For me personally, like Super Meat Boy has all those bonus levels, and they've got just characters from all different types of indie games. I mean, how do you feel? I mean, you're just talking about, like, different lots of indie developers in London. Not to use the term like an indie clique, but does it feel that there's at least a really vibrant community, particularly in like the Shoreditch part of London? Because I've been up here many, many times, and there've been loads of different events going on. Like, do you really feel there's a really just an uprising of indie development here in the capital?
I had a chance to meet either indie developers, like from London, and developers of proper games, AAA games. And I have to say that it's a huge difference. And the difference is the way they're thinking about stuff. Because just to make an example, if you think about Tomb Raider, can you imagine, for example, the developers of Tomb Raider making up a development blog and showing their bugs, their stuff? That's something that, they just don't want to do it. And I think that what is really key in the indie community is that developers are showing the game from the very beginning, so you can actually follow the game throughout its development. And if you are a player and you saw this, it's a little bit like being part of the game itself. It's a little bit about, I talk on Twitter to the developer, so it's like as if I'm part of the game itself, And this is an added value that developers should consider when they're making a game, because if you have a player that feels attached emotionally to the development of your game, it will actually probably buy that game because of this reason. On top of this, all the developers I met here in the indie scene were extremely nice. People you can talk to. What is really surprising is that some of them are really popular, really famous, and some of them made an insane amount of money. And someone even here. Not me, unfortunately. Not exactly, not yet. Excuse me, not yet. And despite this, they're so cool about it. They're not, the kind of people like, my game is the best game ever. They're just very cool about it, and I loved it.
Well, to be fair, us all game developers and writers and stuff, we're not the kind of people that really, if we have a bunch of money, we're not going to spend it on a giant flashy car. We wouldn't even know what to do with it. So let's talk about then just you in general. Let's move away now from the game. I mean, you said that you was programming and stuff from a very young age. I presume at some point there were games involved with this. So tell me what got you started into playing games and what sort of inspired you to think, yeah, I would like to do this one day. This would be something that I would enjoy even as a career or just as a hobby on the side.
I always made games, so as soon as I could start programming, it was always a game. And at the beginning, I remember I was making like text adventures in Basic, QBasic. So, but for that time, it was quite it was quite appropriate for that time. Um, I didn't. I'm not a really good player in the sense that I haven't played a lot of games, and I'm not really something. Oh yeah, it's a new game. I want to play it. I want to buy a game. I rather want to make a game myself rather than just play a game that already exists. To me, achievements in games are not achievements in my life. But if I make a game, it's a little bit of both. So I'm achieving something and making a game, and that's for me the huge difference. Of course, for me being indie has always been well. I've just recently started to call myself an indie developer. Before I was making games, but the games were just for myself. So it was something that, oh, I wish I could play this, so let's make this. And I have a bunch of, very cool games I made, but they're so unfinished, so raw, that probably no one else would actually understand how to play and would actually have fun with them. So for me, there was a huge difference, was the moment in which you make a game that is not just for yourself, but it's also for someone else. And of course, yes, I make a game that I like to play, but it's different. Making a game you like to play, it's different from making a game just for yourself or making a game for something else, because then you have to think how to explain the mechanics, you have to do tutorial. In all the previous game I made, there is no tutorial whatsoever because I know how to play, and that's a big difference. So it's really cool. I started this I would say career at this point. Hopefully.
So is there a place you have to go to get signed off as an indie developer? Do you have to get a certificate? Do you have to pay a small sum of money?
Actually, no, in a sense that anyone can say I'm an indie developer, and this is, I won't say bad, but yes, it's bad. Because at the beginning, being an indie developer was a little bit of a proof of quality. So you say, oh, that's an indie game, this game is cool. Now everyone is trying to make indie games, and this is good in a sense that, even children, they approach programming because they want to make games, and they want to make good games. But this doesn't make them indie developers in that sense. In a sense that it's not the fact that you're indie that automatically does good game. And in fact, you can see a huge amount, of clones of Super Mario that they doesn't all this game, they don't really add anything new to the games itself, to the gameplay itself. But it's still a good step that more and more people are involved in game development, and they start to, for example, learn to code, learn to programming, or learn to make sound or to make art, just because they want to create something. And I think this is probably one of the biggest changes in a way. Children, and teens are growing these days, because before, people have always been passively reacting to toys. So you have a toy, but you don't make toys. Now it's the opposite. You can actually make games, and there are a lot of tools to enable people with no programming skills to make games. And there are drawbacks, of course, but I think that it's a good start, and I appreciate much more someone that is making a bad game, but he made himself, rather than someone that spent months and months playing and is really, really good at a certain type of game.
It's like it seems we're getting to that point where there's going to be this meta level of indie games where we have to now start breaking them down into certain genres of like your Ludum Dare type weekend style games, and then just your more solo project made in a bedroom over the span of 6 months type games. Like, where do you see things going forward? Just because with Sony being the way they are now, with Microsoft doing certain 180s in certain fields in terms of their stance on indie games. Like, where do you see things going from here? Not just for yourself personally, but just for the whole indie community as a whole. Like, is it going to get to the point where, you know, AAA gaming will always be the big, you know, the benchmark, if you will, to a certain extent, just financially. But, you know, can indie games be that way? I mean, just because if one person is being successful and makes a lot of money, in some ways that probably works out just as well as if a AAA company with a team of 300, 400 people makes that much money as well. And then for some reason decides that that isn't enough money because they spent £5 billion making it or something.
The term indie itself is really, really abused. So, for example, Still Time is an indie game, but Minecraft is an indie game. So, I wish. Yeah, I mean, I wish they could be indie the same way. So, I mean, of course, we are talking about a game being played thousands of times and a game being, you know, played millions of times, thousands of millions of times. So I think that, you know, even in the indie scene, there are different layers, you know, different stages. So that's really a problem because, of course, then you have to. Indie now is not well defined at all. So you have to now. I have to call myself garage indie. You know, I mean, in the sense that, you know, that's the way I made game. For me, that's what define indie. Because otherwise, you know, people will compare, you know, even Still Time, for example, to Braid, that is an indie game, but you can see that they're on different, for now, they're on completely different levels, and I think that this is something really important that we need to. For the future, well, if you look, for example, at movies, at films, you can see that it's a little bit the same. You have these huge, big AAA movies, you know, like explosions, you know, CGA effects, amazing graphics, and they're very, very, very poor stories, and, you know, plots that are really trivial and stupid. And the other way, you have movies that are indie and, you know, are very fresh, are really interesting, but does it mean that anyone want to see them? Sometimes I go to the theater just because, you know, I want to see explosions. And they say, okay, let me pay £9 just to see something blowing up in space, you know. And I don't necessarily want to be bored by, you know, a very complex story. And there are some type of movies that are amazing, like Primal, the one about time travel. I don't remember exactly the name. And it's such a complicated movie. If you look at it, you can watch it like 10 times and still not understanding at all the movie. And maybe that's not what I wanted. Maybe I just, you know, want to relax for one day. So I think that AAA games, it's something different from indie games. And, you know, I think we need, in a way, we need both. For example, I recently played BioShock. The environment in BioShock is really nice. It's something that I really enjoy to play, but gameplay-wise, nothing new. It gives you the illusion of being something new with a lot of tricks, but essentially the interaction is very static. You actually don't do anything new compared to other games. But it's really nice. It's really a pleasant experience because you explore a lot of places. The architecture is really nice. You go on the skyline. It's really nice. But sometimes I want to play that. Sometimes I don't. So I don't hope for the future that, you know, indie game will replace AAA games or the other way around. I just think that they're different things that they're trying to they made to different type of audience or for, you know, different type of experience that people want to have. So I think that it's nice to have a good, you know, linear combination of both of them.
It's nice to have a healthy balance of the both of them. Well, okay. Well, tell me, do you have an end goal, a tunnel, a light at the end of the tunnel for when Still Time will be finished? You know, the rest of the year, how do you hope? Well, so we'll go with how do you hope things will plan out, and we'll go with realistically where do you think things are going to span out within the next 6 months or so?
Oh God. At the moment, I'm in touch with Sony, as you probably know, to bring the game on PS Vita, and I have to say nothing has been signed yet. So of course it's not sure, but we are both confident that, you know, both parts are confident that this will happen quite soon. I hope that the game will be released somewhere late next year, but I still don't know it. Because, of course, we haven't discussed it with Sony, so we don't know how much we want a game, how big we want a game to be. And this, of course, will impact, the type of the time that necessary to release the game. Because in the alpha version you have some kind of puzzles, but actually, in my mind, I have millions of them, much new, more mechanics, more stuff. So it would be a problem of finding a right balance to release the game in a reasonable amount of time, but with a reasonable density of content. So the game won't be boring and the game won't be repetitive, and even people who play the alpha version will actually be able to enjoy the new version. So I actually have to say that I have no idea. I'm working on a game at the moment, and I've got the main mechanics is almost completely working, and I have a lot of new stuff. But from there to a polished game that is finished is really, really hard, because people think, oh, okay, but the main mechanic is working, so the game is finished. No, it's not working like that. It's trivial, but it's always the last 10%, as everyone say. They actually take the 90%, because you make the game and then you have to refine it, you have to polish it, and you have to listen to a lot of feedback, and you have to have millions of people play the game. What is the most out the spot for me is looking someone playing the game, because how solve the level, but people don't. So you look at them and say, oh, they're struggling there. Oh, and you desperately want to see, no, you have to do that. But if you do that, you actually exploit, you spoil them, the way they will discover and approach the game. So I have no idea. Let's see how things are going. And maybe in the next few weeks, I will be able to tell you more about Sony PS Vita, still time.
I'll latch on to the end of the blog post or whatever when this gets put up. And I mean, I haven't spoken too much about the narrative of the game, because you yourself in your blog post, there isn't that much there other than that it has its own narrative. It's not just here's a game, here's some puzzle mechanics, have at it. I don't know how much you want to give, because you haven't given a whole lot, just to keep people intrigued. But how does that play with the story, in that you have a lot of games like these kind of puzzle platform games, where the main goal is to get like the best time, get the best score. Stuff like Stealth Inc. Great game, by the way. You should probably play it. But does this have that sort of level structure? Or is it more just you're following the story along, like Thomas was alone? What way is your end goal for that going to be?
Something I don't like about the alpha version is that there isn't a story. So I try to make some, little hint of a possible story, but it was just a teasing. At the time, there wasn't any story whatsoever when I made the game. I want to change that, and I'm changing that. So the final version will actually be heavily story-driven. And the story is really cool. It's quite complicated. It's very time travel, mind-bending stuff. And the player will actually... at the beginning of the story, won't have any memories, as it happened in the first level of the alpha version. And, playing and playing and playing, you'll actually be able to assemble pieces of the story. And I want to make things in a way that is not easy to understand the story of the game directly. So probably if you play the game just one time, you won't really be able to understand everything of what is going on. And this will be intentional. Also because at the moment, my idea is that you finish the game and you can replay the game again. And because, of course, in the story you're going up and down the timeline, back and forth, you will actually, when you restart the game, you will actually have made some changes in the past. So the future will actually be different, and this will help you to unlock new areas and do things in a different way. So discovering new part of the world you haven't discovered the previous time you played. And of course, people will have, much more, they will discover much more of what's going on inside the story. But yes, there will be proper story, proper events, and a lot of level will actually be extremely story driven. So we'll be able, to interact with a lot of NPCs and do stuff, and that will help you, will help them. So let's see how it goes.
So that's really interesting, because not so much an issue with puzzle platform games. I guess it is that the replayability having the replayability can be a struggle, because once you've figured out the puzzle, you don't really feel like you need to do it again. And the way that some developers implement a way to make this replayable is just, okay, you have to get the quickest time, and they have the leaderboards. So for your way of doing this, by the sounds of it, that you get through the game, but then it expands new areas, is a very, if it goes with the narrative as well, is a very challenging way of approaching this, and I commend you for it, and I do hope that it works out. And I played it at E2, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, which is why I came down here and wanted to talk to you about it. Obviously. All right. Well, if you've got anything, your Twitter handle, any events that you're doing or going to be attending, and people can get to talk to you, feel free to plug yourself away.
Okay, so my Twitter handle is Alan Zucconi, but people probably will spell it wrong. Because we already discussed about that. No one got it right. I will present Still Time at Game City 8 later this year, so anyone that is listening wants to come and say hello. I will also have biscuits. Probably people who are listening... People might not know, but every time I'm presenting a game or I'm seeing games, I always bring biscuits. So
most of your budget's going?
Well, they're from Tesco, so not really. But yeah, let's say yes. Let's say yeah, well, when I will be rich, I will buy them. So if anyone wants to come there, otherwise, sorry, the first Monday of every month, I'm usually at London Indies in Angel. It's a very cool event with a lot of bunching developers, so it's really, really cool if you or other people want to join there. So if someone is listening and wants to, have a quick glance at the indie scene, that might be a good start. And we recently started to do indie co-working, that is like twice a week, Monday and Thursday. We choose a different location every time about in London. We just met and have a coffee and develop games. So, if someone wants to join, happy to join.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Alan. Thank you for doing this. I wish you the best of luck with everything. And as soon as you find out about the whole Sony situation, I will gladly put that up for you. And thank you for anyone that's been listening. I'm Mark Robinson, and we'll see you again next time.